Is it nearby? How far do you have to drive? Is it somewhere long in the past where you may never surf it again? It's a subjective question for sure, but we all have our favorite spots to surf or that we have surfed at one point. Now, I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. For me, I think the best surf break, or more personal to say this, my favorite surf break is Duranbah. So Deba on the Gold Coast of Australia. Now this is going to tie into, I think, just the best place in the world for surfing. In my experience, is the Gold Coast, consisting of Snapper Rocks, Deba, Straddy, South Straddy, Stradbroke Island. There you're going to get like some of the best waves in the world right next to each other. Now, if I had to go out on a normal day, my favorite wave is Duranbah. I'm talking like normal crowds and I got to go surf. I'm going to pick Deba. It's a great wave. It is lots of A-frames. It is, and I'm checking out the stream right now on the old YouTube app. We're using the lovely EMEET S800. So the EMEET is in the chat. And the H6 Zoom top capsule mic has entered the room as well. And I am pretty blown away. That looks amazing. So great job, EMEET. You're doing fantastic. Let's see. South Straddy, Stradbroke Island. It sounds good. I'm going to take that. It sounds good to me. So Straddy, Gold Coast, Superbank, but Deba is my favorite. It's at the top. Few reasons why. First, the crowds are actually pretty manageable at Duranbah. You would think that it's like on the hub in the best place to surf in the world, somewhere in the world. But really, it's nice because it's right next to Snapper Rocks. Also, you have Burleigh Heads nearby. So you have a few other breaks that take away a lot of the surfers and leave room at Deba. And because how Deba is set up, it's a bunch of A-frames. So the crowd does get spread out. Even on the most crowded days at Deba, I would always get awesome waves. And the waves would always be very barely and to be very peaky. Deba is kind of like if you took the Outer Banks of North Carolina and it was like as good as it gets. And you just take that and you put it on the Gold Coast because it's like that every single day. Deba is a super consistent wave. It's good all the time. And the shape is really nice. Also, you have a sand bottom, so it's a little less hardcore than a reef bottom. Another reason why the Gold Coast in general, I think, is like my favorite surf spots to surf is Burleigh Heads. Burleigh Heads, there's just something magical about it. If you've ever been to Australia, you've been to Burleigh Heads, you've been to the little drum circles down there, you've just been in the Burleigh Heads area by the surf break. It is kind of similar to even Swami's Beach, I would say, in North County, San Diego. There's just like a certain, I guess I'm using this word vibe. It's like the most cringiest word in 2024, but there's a vibe at Burleigh Heads that is just like, it's hard to explain. And that vibe doesn't exist as much at Deba and at Snapper Rocks or at South Straddy. So Burleigh Heads is like a really fun wave. But still, even though it's like an awesome sick wave, you have the bottom's a little gnarly, it's reef, it can get a little more crumbly. Duranbah is usually glassy. It has two big jetties on each side. And I think just how it's like angled out, it's like very glassy all the time. I mean, let's look up on Surfline right now what Deba is. I have no clue what it's going to say. Let's just look up Duranbah. Right now, Duranbah. Oh, it's actually not that good right now. It's 2 to 3 thigh to stomach and plus. So thigh to stomach, 2 to 3 plus. And I mean, it still looks super fun. It's pretty much like waist to chest and crumbly and looking really fun. So even on the worst of worst days, Deba still always delivers. And Deba is a super cool break because you'll usually see Mick Fanning's truck there. You'll see Dingo Morrison out there. It's similar to Snapper Rocks, where you'll see a lot of pros. Now, let's pause and say, like, say no one else was out and I could have any wave I wanted to myself, then I would probably pick Superbank, because that wave it's literally just a surf park before surf parks existed. You can catch a pretty similar wave at Snapper Rocks on the same day. Like, most of the waves are going to be pretty similar. And just how the swells hit Snapper Rocks, like, it's like a pretty textbook wave and how it breaks, where it can be very throwy by the rock and then continue like that. And then it's either going to be like a little more crumbly as you kind of go down, or it's going to keep itself. But it usually stays pretty throwy. Then it's depending on how good the swell is. It's going to extend all the way down Rainbow, Greenmount, and you get into Kira, and it ends up being like one of the longest point breaks ever on sand bottom, which is pretty crazy too, because like, how does the sand keep it where it breaks so well? It's just because the bluffs are positioned so perfectly and the swells come into the Gold Coast that way. We're going to just light it up really nicely. Kind of reminds me of like of C Street and Ventura, where there's like such a long point break that it's pretty unbelievable. You can surf from this spot, like, it seems like it's like a mile. It just seems forever. So if there was no one out, I would pick Superbank. If there were people out and I had to battle crowds, I would pick D-Bah as my favorite spots in the world. So comment down below what your favorite surf break is. If it's kind of like a secret break, maybe just lie and pick another spot, or put a disclaimer that you're about to unload the secret spot on the world and you could, there could be repercussions you'll have to face. I'm sorry about that. Some runner-ups I had on my list for my favorite surf spots in the world. Another really awesome spot is in New Zealand, and it's called, what's it called? Well, Raglan. Yeah, Raglan. So like, Raglan is this left-hand point break in New Zealand, and it's kind of like rocky and stormy, and like, for some reason it's not really like the best. It is a great, awesome wave, but it's not like as picturesque as like Snapper Rocks. But what makes Raglan cool is it's super consistent. The like scenery surrounding it is like unreal. It's like you're in Lord of the Rings essentially. It is on the North Island. Lord of the Rings is filmed on the South Island, but it's similar enough where you're like, this is really cool, and you're just like looking how awesome the scenery is, and that part is super cool. And then when you paddle out at Raglan and you do take waves, it's like nice because you can take the wave and kind of just paddle back out around, and it usually breaks it a way that lets you do that easier than like Snapper Rocks or other point breaks. Whereas like when you fall on Snapper Rocks, like you're walking down. I mean, the paddling back at Snapper Rocks, it's essentially like a vortex suck machine that sucks you down, and you're at Snapper Rocks, you're paddling the whole time, just trying to stay in position, especially at the beginning stages near the rock. Raglan is not as intense of a suction where the point break's going to kind of like drag you down. You got to maintain your position the whole time. Most point breaks do have some pull, some current, but Raglan is just kind of set up where it's not the worst thing ever. Another runner-up for me for my favorite surf spot, it has to be S-turns, which kind of doesn't really break anymore, but even Rodanthe, or even shout out Jeanette's Pier in North Carolina, Outer Banks, North Carolina. When North Carolina is like doing its thing, it's pretty much like D-Bah, which is my winner, my favorite wave in the world, except more hollow and obviously less crowds. And the water can just get like so warm in Outer Banks, where it is similar to D-Bah. The Gold Coast, the water does get very warm. It's just not, the sun isn't as intense. Like when you're at Gold Coast, that sun is like the most intense sun in the world for some reason. Outer Banks gets hot, but Gold Coast definitely etches it out a little bit. So I'm going to give another runner-up to the Outer Banks, Jeanette's Pier, S-turns. Now, when S-turns back in the day was doing its thing, it rivaled like Hawaii. Like when it was good, it was powerful, good, hollow. Like you'd have to be on your A game. It was not really no jokes going on. You could easily get effed up. Very, very good at S turns. And it'd be mostly a left, and it'd be by this famous house they filmed Knights of Rodanthe. Shout out Richard Gere. But this house, I don't think it's even there anymore because the house was literally on the beach right at the ocean where in Outer Banks, it's essentially a peninsula. And every time there's a hurricane, like there's a chance Outer Banks can just get sucked away. So one time the house just kind of got knocked down a little bit. And every year now, houses in Rodanthe, in that one area of Rodanthe, it's just super prone to getting hit by a lot of weather. And the water comes up very high there. So S turns and was an awesome wave, and even the Rodanthe Pier and the Rodanthe area still is good. There was just a bend in the sand in the beach at S turns, and it just created this left that it was pretty much like pipeline. It was an intense drop, very thick lip, and it would just throw, and you'd have to like airdrop or make sure you made the drop, and then right away it'd be like vortex barrel like in the thumbnail. Jeanette's Pier is like definitely more of a chill wave. It's in Nag's Head, which is southern or northern Outer Banks, but it's called Southern Shores. And it's Nag's Head doesn't get as intense as the Outer Banks, but it can be very consistent and can be a little less prone to the wind and the weather. So sometimes you end up surfing Nag's Head because Outer Banks is too windy and too out of control. Certain swells hit it certain ways. But Jeanette's Pier back in the day was like one of the sickest spots, and it was pretty slept on. And then there was for a while there, like it kind of didn't break that much anymore. And then I see the last Ernesto swell, it was breaking and it looks sick. So I was like, oh boy, Jeanette's Pier is back. Very nice. So that's another like one of my, I'm going to start making a list now, my top 5 to 10 favorite waves. Another awesome surf break that I gotta, put on my list here is Ventura. Is essentially the C Street point break from C Street to the pier in the harbor. Not really the harbor, but from C Street to the pier, just when the point break in Ventura is going off and it's like in the winter doing its thing. It's a big swell. It's like one of the best point breaks you're ever going to surf in terms of like it being so long. It is just unbelievably long, and it can get kind of so stormy and just pulley there that you can like go a long, long way and then have to kind of walk back. But it's not as much of a like barely little perfect wave like snapper rocks or a lot of point breaks. It's actually like can be pretty big and critical and end up being like kind of a difficult wave to surf. It almost reminds me, this just popped in my head, of Lennox Head, Australia, which is a similar point break where it's not necessarily the most barrely, but it can be because there's rocks and like cobblestones and stuff. It can be like kind of dredgy on the bottom as the water pulls off the reef, and then also be kind of a critical lips as you're going down, and more of a Taylor Knox style of surfing as opposed to the Gold Coast where you're pretty much trying to get barreled the whole time as you do turns and stuff. So that's what makes Ventura Point Break really awesome as well, because it's kind of good a lot, but then it actually turns on when it gets huge and the swell is like rifling and you can't really surf other places. So yeah, those are just a few of my favorite surf spots. Again, I'm going to have to give my number one spot, the best surf spot in the world, in my opinion, is Duranbah on the Gold Coast of Australia. Goldies, don't come looking for me. We all know how sick the wave is. This isn't like new news to anyone. When you live on the Gold Coast, you just know D-Bah is like going to be good, and it's super fun. And luckily there's enough other spots around where not everyone's going to be out all the time. And really quick, I got to give another honorable mention is Straddy. So if you take D-Bah and you mix it in with Snapper Rocks and Outer Banks, you're going to get South Stradbroke Island. And this is where like Beeb Durbich is from. And essentially it's the most hollowest, throwiest wave you could ever imagine. It's like taking S turns, making little peaks of it, and then adding in shallow water and a inlet you got to paddle across that you could easily die in the inlet. get eaten by a shark or you just get crushed trying to walk up these rocks, there's actually a ferry that runs back and forth. I don't know if it still does. You pay them some money to bring you to Stradbroke Island. But that wave, if you want barrels like Hawaii style barrels, then that is where you go. It is just the throwiest. That's all you're doing is Straddy's getting barreled. So it's pretty sweet because you're literally going there and just dropping them barrels. So, and then obviously, we gotta shout out like the best waves in the world that are like Teahupoo, we all just saw, and Pipeline, and these waves that they've reached the level like beyond surfing where people that don't surf might still know what Pipeline is. And now after the Olympics, people are gonna know what that wave is. But I kind of don't enjoy those waves as much because they kind of get lumped into the Snapper Rocks category where they're so well known, they're so popular, they're always crowded. There's a lot of pressure. It's like surfing Kelly's wave pool. Like, all right, when your time is up to go, you better not blow it because it's like there's another 30 minutes till your next time, and if you miss it, you're effed. So it's a very similar wave like at Pipeline. I have got to surf Pipeline, and I got to surf it when it wasn't that gnarly in terms of crowd or wave conditions. It was just gnarly enough to scare the crap out of you, but there wasn't like this crazy pecking order, and it wasn't the most intense you could think. So I'm really grateful I got to surf Pipeline, and I broke a board there, so that was cool, a rusty board, and I got some of the best rails of my whole life. And the one day I did not go out of my whole life because it was too big was at Pipeline. And it was the only day I was like, it's too big. I don't want to go surf. So the one day I was finally humbled in my surf career was at Pipeline. So I guess that is cool to say. And I mean, these days, if it's like super big, like you can just drive around to find a spot, or you can just tell me, I hurt myself, I can't go out, whatever. Like I'm not really chasing that humongous wave feeling anymore. I kind of did another live stream about this where like I'm just trying to surf another day, and then I'm also trying to feel the flow state and achieve that afterglow from surfing. Like, so if your goal is to feel adrenaline rush, then you go charge Pipeline. If your goal is to like just feel the flow and surf the next day, you would go to Deba. So I think even like your favorite wave, your favorite surf spot is going to dictate like what you like in surfing and what you want out of surfing. Some people's favorite wave might be Cardiff Reef, or it might be Tourmaline, or it might be, some spot in Florida just because the water is warm and there's a teeny reef and it's close to their house. The best surf spot doesn't necessarily need to have the best waves. It just has the best options for you in your journey of where you are as a surfer. So, all right, guys, I appreciate everyone for tuning in to another Hero's Journey show. Please smash the like, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and let me know what your favorite surf break is in the world. And we can battle out in the comments to declare the best surf spot in the world. And then we can all go there and blow the spot out, and that'll be perfect. So, till next time, we out. Peace.